Today's shiur begins at the third line from the top of Daf Kuf Ches. Before we begin the actual shiur, we glance at the side where we have a nosei heading. Nosei is a topic heading combined with mivneh, a structural note. You'll notice a double underline that appears. This appears throughout the Tanaic source that we're about to learn, and it highlights the expression Yeser al Kain. Sidra shel dugmois shel miun. We'll have a series of examples of miun shebohen hi omeres, where the girl says I efshi beploni ba'ali v'chol echad yesh bo chidush yoser mikodmo. Each subsequent example will have a novel point that was not seen in the previous example. So we now turn to the Gemara, the text, third line from the top. Tonu Rabbanan, E zehu miun. What is meant by miun? Omra, the girl, says, and we discussed in our previous shiur quite extensively, miun, the rabbinic institution of marriage, done through a mother or brother of a little girl who is still a minor. What is textually or verbally, what is the miun? Omra, the girl says, I efshi befloni bali. I cannot be with him. I can't continue with him. I efshi bekidushin shikidshuni imi vachi. It is impossible for me, the kiddushin that my mother or brother had instituted for me. Yeser al Kain, Omer of Yehuda. Let us, before we go on, let us point out that by the fact that it says here Yeser al Kain, that indicates that the following is even a greater chiddush, so that the first statement made, the first example is the, we'll say, the most obvious, the most basic, the most understandable form of miun. But we go a little further, and we should also point out that each time Rashi will take care to point out what the additional chidush is. So now, in continuing, Yeser al Kain, Omer Rabbi Yehuda, even more so, Rabbi Yehuda says, Afilu yosheves ba'apirion v'oleches mi beis ovia lebeis bailo. Even if she's sitting in an apirion is a type of cart or chariot, and she's being taken to the husband's house. She's holeches, that is, mi beis ovia, from her father's house, from her own home, lebeis bailo, to the husband's house. The Omra, and she says, I efshi befloni bali. I cannot deal with him. I cannot be with him, with this husband. Zehu miun. That also is miun. The Rashi explains what's the point over here. So on the second line from the top, Afilu k'shi yosheves ba'apirion v'noisen oisa mi beis ovio lebeis bailo. She's sitting in this unit, this vehicle through which she's being carried from her father's house to her husband's house, l'chupot, to the marriage canopy, v'omra, and she says, I efshi bo, I can't be with him. Di'ika l'meimar, there's room to think, I lo baya le, if she doesn't want him, techus v'teisel, let her just get off. And then she doesn't just get off, she seems to remain in this apirion, afilu hachi havi miun, even though she doesn't just jump off, but she remains that way. That still constitutes miun. Let's continue in the Gemara. Yeser al Kain Rabbi Yehuda. Even more than that, Rabbi Yehuda says, Afilu hoyu orchin mesubin beveis baila, v'hi oimedes umashke alehem. There are guests in the husband's house, and she is serving them. V'omra alehem, and she says to the guests, I efshi befloni baili. I can't be with him. I don't want to be with my husband. Harei hu miun. That also constitutes miun. Rashi points out, afilu orchim deleka bezdin. There isn't a court. V'su, and furthermore, dahani mishtak shaski. These people they'll listen and they'll keep quiet. V'lo ka modi. They aren't going to inform. They're not going to let it be known. Even so, that is considered miun. We continue in the Gemara. Yeser al Kain Omar Rabbi Yehuda, Afilu shigra bailo eitzel chenvoni lohavi lo chefetz mishalo. Even if the husband sent his wife, this minor, to a store owner to bring an item that belongs to the husband, the Omra, and she says, I efshi befloni baili, I can't be with this man, Ein l'cha miyun gadol mizeh. That is the ultimate type of miyun. Now, let's see what's the chidush over here. So Rashi says, Eitzel chenvoni, Rashi on the second narrow line, the leka elo chenvoni. There isn't a group of people, there's certainly not a court, all there is the store owner. Vika l'meimar, and there's room to think, mishum da'atricha hu lahavi lo chayfetz mishalo. Why is she being minus? Not because she's serious about she can't be with him, but she's upset with the fact that he's troubling her to bring him his thing. Nevertheless, that does constitute a miyun, an act of, we'll say, dissolution of their rabbinic marriage. Rabbi Chanina ben Antignus Omer kol tinokes v'chulei. Rabbi Chanina ben Antignus had mentioned in the Mishnah, it was found, of course, at the bottom of Kuf Zayim Beis, that a girl who is so young that she's incapable of watching her kiddushin, she doesn't watch, she doesn't recognize the value of the money or the money equivalent that she received. She's not going to care for it, so she doesn't need to do miyun. The marriage is of so little significance that she, as he said in the Mishnah, einot tzricha l'mayit, she can just walk out without any formal statement. The Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, halacha kerebi Chanina ben Antignus. Halacha follows his ruling. Tana. Before we continue in the text, we glance at the side. We have a topic heading, Kitana Shelo Miana, a girl who didn't express a formal statement of miyun, as we saw earlier, Efshi B'foni Baili, V'omda, V'nisei Slacher, she got up and married some other man, or V'niskatshe La'acher, or she accepted money from another man in marriage. B'shnei Mikrim Elu, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, Dehain Hain Miuna, according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, even without the formal statement, her actions constitute her miyun. HaGemara Tevarer I Pligi Rabbanon Lei. The Gemara will then analyze, do the Rabbanon disagree with him, or maybe they agree with him, and the question is on how many counts do they agree with him, on the Nisuin, or even if she merely accepts money from someone else. And under the Mivneh, the structural note, the diamonds introduce Ibaya Laho, the question form. She'elos Shekuros Lamashe Nizkar B'nosei. These are questions that relate to that which we mentioned in our topic heading. So now the Gemara. Tana, Kitana Shelo Miana. A minor who was married to a fellow and she didn't express her formal miyun intention. Ve'omda v'niseis, she got up and married someone else. Mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omru, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, they say Nisuel hein mi'unah. The fact that she married someone else, she entered Nisuin. That means she consummated a marriage with some other man. That is her miyun. Ibaya laho, a question is raised. Niskatsha mahu. Let us say that she accepted money from another man in anticipation of marriage. Again, when we say another man, means she's she was married through her mother or brother to Mr. A, and then she, on her own, accepts money from Mr. B. When she accepts money, meaning money in his offer of marriage to her. Toshma, Tana Shalomiana v'omda v'niskatsha. This very case, a girl who didn't express a formal miyun to her husband, got up and accepted money from another man in marriage. Mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omru, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, they had said, Kiddushel hein miyunera. The kiddushin, that the money that she accepts in marriages, which we refer to as by the term kiddushin, that is her expression of miyun with regard to the first husband. Ibaya laho. Now the question is raised. You'll notice that we have a long question marking. There's several parts to the question. It's a build-up form question, you'll see. Ibaya lo pligi rabbanon olei Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira olo. Do the rabbanon, do the other rabbis disagree with him or not? Im tim salom plig. And if you say they argue with him, b'kiddushin o afilu b'nisuin, do they argue with him with regard to kiddushin, or even with regard to nisuin? Even though nisuin is a greater expression of departure from the first fellow, do they Rabbanan accept that as her miyun? And if you say that the Rabbanan disagree even with regard to nisuin, that the fact she accepted money, and even if she went all the way with some Mr. 2, it does not constitute miyun. Halacha kamoso ein halacha kamoso. Does the halacha follow Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira or not? V'imtim some halacha kamoso. And if you say that the halacha does follow Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, b'nisuin o afilu b'kiddushin, is it with regard to nisuin or even with regard to kiddushin that also constitutes mi'un? Tashma Omar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Halacha Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Rav Yehuda says that the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, and Tosfos adds very importantly. Tosfos, the third Tosfos from the top. Tashma the Omar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira ve'akulhu koi. This is going on everything he said. Beina kiddushin, beina nisuin. Whether it be kiddushin or nisuin, that is her miyun. Michlad Rabbana pligi olei afilu nisuin. This would imply, by the use of the word halacha, as a rule throughout the Shas, when the term halacha appears, it's coming to dispel or dismiss other opinions. So Shmuel's ruling like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Halacha michlal de pligi, as the Gemara says. The term halacha implies that the Rabbanan agree, and as Tosfos pointed out, they disagree with him on both points, on kiddushin and nisuin as well. Ve'akati tiboyaloch. Another question that I still want to ask: Dehava nesiva meikara o dilma mekacha. The girl, with respect to the first husband, we understand that if she accepts kiddushin or nisuin from a second man, so that constitutes miyun. What was her status with regard to the first husband? Was she even nisua? Had she consummated marriage with the first husband? And even with this light level form of miyun, this unexpressed miyun, that is sufficient for her to leave a state of nisuin? Or mikchesha, she was only at a kiddushin stage with the first husband, but had it been a more advanced stage, she had reached the nisuin stage, maybe this miyun kal, this light form of departure, wouldn't be sufficient. Tashma, we bring a proof from a case which we actually alluded to earlier on Daf Kuf Heyamid Beis. The Kalsei da Abdon Imrud, the daughters-in-law of Abdon. Abdon was a student of Rebbe. His daughters-in-law had rebelled, had left their husbands. Shodar Rebbe Zugi de Rabbanon Lemivdekinu. Rebbe, who was Abdon's Rav, Rebbe sent a pair of Rabbanon to check them out to see if they have reversed themselves from their rebellion from their husbands. Amri Lahu. So the Rabbanan said to these girls, Nashi, girls, women, chazu, we're talking about minors. So he says, Nashi, chazu, gavraichu dekasu. Do you see your husbands are coming? Amri Lahu. So they reacted, Nehavu, gavraichu ditchu. Let them be your husbands. Omar Rebbe, Ein l'cha miyun gadol mizeh. So that even though you don't have the formal language of miyun, this is the ultimate in disapproval of their husbands. And hence Rebbe's reaction, you don't have a greater form of miyun than that. My lav dehava nesiva. Is it not so that they had reached a nisuin stage with their first husbands? So this would show that this called informal type of miyun works even with regard to a woman that had reached nisuin with the first husband. The Gemara says, no, we can't prove that conclusively. These daughters-in-law of Abdon had only reached a kiddushin level with the first husbands, so that with their acerbic reaction, let them be your husbands. So that kind of light form of miyun is enough to get out of a kiddushin level of relationship, but not necessarily nisuin. V'alocha Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira v'afilu b'nisuin de kamo. The halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira across the boards, even if the relationship to the first husband had reached the nisuin level. This light form, this informal form of miyun is sufficient. The Gemara continues with a quote of Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah had said that ein maisek tana klum. he said that the actions of a minor are of no halachic significance, and the fact that she is with another man, she initiated a marriage with another man, it's elokimifut, it's like a seduced woman, and that is, of course, in terms of marital terms, is meaningless. The Gemara. Omar Rav Yehuda Shmuel Chozrani al kol tzadei chachamim. I sought out all the different aspects of opinions amongst the Rabbanan. V'lo matzasi odom. I didn't find any person shehishva midoisa biktano kerebi Ozer that was so consistent with his analysis of a minor as Rebbe Ozer. Sha'asa Rebbe Ozer kemetayelesimo b'chotzer. Rebbe Ozer looks at the actions done by a minor in terms of marriage as a girl who's strolling along with a fellow in a courtyard. Ve'omedes micheko, she gets up from his bosom. Ve'toiveles ve'ocheles b'truma, and immerses herself because of any intimacy that they may have had, which creates a state of ritual impurity. So she's toveles, and the sun sets, and then continues and goes ahead and eats truma. If you were talking, of course, about a bas kohen who had been married to a Yisrael, so that all she has to do is just walk away from him. Nothing is necessary. That's toveles v'cheles b'truma lo erev. Lo erev means after sundown, which is necessary for achieving purity with regard to eating of truma. Tanya. And before we continue, we glance at the side. We have a topic heading in which we will see in the Gemara Machlokes Rebbe Ozer Rebbe Yeshua be'inyan ketana shekitshos atzma, a machlokes between these two Tanaic authorities regarding a minor who had married herself off. Ma heim hatotzaos legabi bailo. What are the results with regard to her and her husband? Mitzi Oseh, items that she finds. Haforas Nedorea, the absolution of vows that she makes. Maisa Yodea, or income that she produces. Vod, and other aspects. These are all points that in the case of a regular marriage, as a result of the marriage, a husband is entitled to these things. What about in the case of a ketana, a minor that married herself off? Tanya, Rebbe Ozer Omer, Ein Maisik Tana Klum. The actions done that are initiated by a minor are of no halachic significance. Ve'ein Bailo Zakai Lo B'Mitziasa. The husband does not merit receiving articles she finds, lost items that she finds. V'lo b'Maisiyada, nor her income. V'lo b'Haforas Nedora, nor does he have the right to absolve her vows. V'eino Yorsha, and in the event that she dies, he does not inherit her. V'ein Metamela, and if he is a Kohen, he would not defile himself in her burial. Klolo Shel Davar, the rule is Eino Ki Ishtoi L'chol Davar. She is not his wife with regard to anything Ella Shetzricha Miyun. All that we expect is for her to express her lack of desire to be with him. She should be mima'enes. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Rabbi Yeshua, you will see, starts from the opposite standpoint. He says, by law, zakai b'mitziasa, the husband is entitled to all of these elements, the lost items she finds, of ma'aseh or income, absolution of vows, v'yorsha will inherit her, mitamela, and can defile himself to her. Rashi points out that even though Tuma is a doraisa violation if unwarranted. So how can you explain that a man who's considered a husband only on a rabbinic level, if he happens to be a kohen, how can he defile himself to her? Because on a Torah level, it's not considered a husband-wife connection. So Rashi explains, since the husband is going to inherit her, her family members have no interest in her and won't tend to her burial. She then would be classified as a meis mitzvah, as an unattended to corpse. The only one available then to bury her would be the husband. So even if he's a Kohen is entitled or is expected to defile himself in the burial of a mace mitzvah. Klolo shel davar. The following is the rule through Rabbi Yeshua. Harehi ki ishto l'chol davar. She is considered his wife. Ella sheyotze b'miyun. It's considered practically a full-fledged wife. Only that for her to depart, all she would require is miyun, as opposed to a formal divorce document. Omar Rebbe, Nirin divrei Rabbi Eliezer mi divrei Rabbi Yeshua. I see Rabbi Eliezer's point more than that of Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer hishva midoisov biktana, for Rabbi Yeshua chilek. Rabbi Eliezer is consistent with his analysis of a katana, whereas by Rabbi Yeshua, you see, he makes distinctions. He doesn't have a consistent view. My chilek, what do you mean by that? Well, if you are viewing her as his wife, tiboy a get, well, she should require then a formal divorce document. Yet, you're telling me, Rabbi Yeshua is telling me on the one hand, she's considered like a full-fledged wife, so then why does he say that miyun is sufficient for absolving the marriage? Why isn't a get necessary? So that since you see this, we'll say this level of inconsistency, Rebbe prefers going with Rebbe Eliezer. The Gemara asks the Rebbe Eliezer Nami, well, according to Rebbe Eliezer also there's room for asking a question, if she's not considered his wife, miyun Nami lo tiboy, shouldn't require even miyun. The Gemara answers, Ella b'chdi no tepuk, what? She should be able to walk out with nothing. So since they were living together, there was a type of relationship with them, something should be required in order to disband that. And therefore, the fact that Rebbe Eliezer requires miyun is not a demonstration of viewing her as anything more than a mere katana. Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer v'chulei. In the Mishnah we saw Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov make a statement that we said would be explained in the Gemara. We didn't explain it in the Mishnah, but he had said, Kol akova shi min ha'ish kilu ishto, Kol akova she'eno min ha'ish kilu eino ishtoi. So now the Gemara. Heichi domi akova shehi min ha'ish v'akova she'eno min ha'ish. What do these terms mean? Can we illustrate them? Amr Yudam Shmuel. We have a marking that on the side we have an explanation. The Noisei Mivneh heading are Deos. The double underline highlights opinions. Deos lahasbi Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov mahi akova min ha'ish and akova she'eno min ha'ish. What do these expressions mean? So Shmuel is the first opinion, double underline. Tov uha linosei. While she was with the first husband, some other man sought her out in marriage. The Amra. And she says, I can't marry you, machmas ploni bali. I'm married to my husband. This is the reason I can't marry you is because I'm married to him. Zuhi akova shehi min ha'ish. This explains that expression. She's delayed, she's held back because of her husband, meaning she attributes her inability to marry someone else because of her husband. So regarding this, then Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov says she is considered ishto. That makes her like his wife. However, if she says to someone else who's seeking her marriage, and she says, "Machmas b'nei Adam she'eino mehuganim li," these other people that are seeking out my marriage, they're not fit for me. I mean, I would love to marry someone else, but these guys are not fit for me. Zuhi akava she'eno min ha'ish. This is considered an akava that's not a result of her husband. She, as we said, she's happy to marry someone else, but not these particular people. The Rashi adds very importantly, Tavur linose ba'oida tachtov v'nis'akful milose b'shvilo kilu hi ishto u'tzricha miyun. And as a result of that, if she were to leave him, this would be reason for requiring miyun. We continue with another opinion in explaining these phrases. Abaye bar Ovin v'Rav Chanina bar Ovin de Amri Travayu. They both say, Nosan lo get. Zu hi akova she minho ish. If he, the husband, gives her a divorce document, this is called akova she minho ish. What practical halachic ramifications does that have? Fu asur b'krovoseh. She cannot marry his relatives. V'hi asura. Let's correct ourselves. The husband cannot marry her relatives. He can't marry her sister. If he divorces her, he can't marry her sister. He can't marry her mother. V'hi asura b'krovov, and he and she is asur to marry his relatives. Upasla min hakahuna. And by her receiving a divorce document, she is rendered unfit to marry a Kohen. Miana boy, if she expresses her desire to depart, to leave him, zu hi akova she'ena min ha'ish. This is called akova. That's not from him. He's not the initiator. And as a result of this, the marriage is basically absolved from the outset. It's undone, we'll say, retroactively. And as a result of that, for who muter b'krovosel, he can marry her sister, her mother. He muteres b'krovov, and she can marry his relatives. For lo posla min hakahuna, and it does not render her unfit from the kahuna. The Gemara asks, what do I need our Mishnah for? This information, katoni l'kamon, is taught in the next Mishnah, where it says, hamema'enes be'ish, a woman who does miyun, who muter b'kroveseha, v'hi muteres b'krova v'lo pas menakuna. Notice the little base that we have here corresponds to the base of the line just before. And here the aleph corresponds to the aleph that you saw 2 lines above. Nosan lo get, who asur b'krovosel, v'hi asur b'krovov, who paslo menakuna. Exactly the same thing that Abaye bar Ovin is claiming our Mishnah teaches is stated explicitly in the next Mishnah. So why the repetition? The Gemara says there's no repetition, it's Pirushe Kamafarish. The next Mishnah comes to explain the terms in the previous Mishnah, Akova min ha'ish v'Akova she'ena min ha'ish. And now we continue with the next Mishnah. Hamema'enes be'ish. The girl, the minor, who walks out of her rabbinic marriage through the miyun expression, who muter b'krovosel, v'hi muteres b'krova v'lo pasel min hakuna. Nosan lo get, if on the other hand he gave her a divorce document, so who asur b'krovosel, v'hi asur b'krovov, upasla min hakuna. Nosan lo get v'hichzira. If a man gave his rabbinic wife a divorce document and then he took her back, miyanavo, and then she, after being taken back, she expresses her miyun intent, leaving him, v'nises li'acher, and then she marries another man, v'nis armala oynis garsha, and with the second man dies or he divorces her, muteres lachzor lo. The girl can go back to her first husband. One should be aware in general with regard to regular adult marriages. The halacha is that a woman who is divorced by her husband, if nothing happens after the divorce, the husband can take her back. That's called machzir grushaso. However, if after the divorce the wife, the divorcee, goes and marries a second man, the first husband, according to Torah law, is not allowed to take her back. That's called an avera that we've seen a number of times in our Masechta. That's called machzir grushaso mishinisis. That's taking back one's divorced wife after she had married someone else. Notice in the case we just featured, you have a girl that was divorced, went back to the husband, and then she walked away from him and married someone else. She's allowed to go back to the first husband. But might you not say, here's a case of a woman that was divorced, married someone else, how can she go back to the first husband? The answer to that is because after she had gone back to the first husband, she then walked away from him through mi'un. And the mi'un, in effect, is mevatel. It neutralizes or it voids the fact that she had been divorced from him previously. So that it eradicates, it dissolves the get. Therefore, you have a girl that simply walked away from husband 1, married Mr. 2. There's no reason she can't go back to Mr. 1. Notice the next case. Pay attention to the order. Mian abo v'echsira. A girl had been mima'enes to her husband, and then he took her back. She went back to him. Nosan law get, and then he divorced her. Exact opposite of the case just before. V'niseis li'acher, and after being divorced, she married another man. V'nisamlis garsha, and then with regard to the second man, she became a widow. The second husband died, or he divorced her. Asura lachzor lo. She cannot go back to the first husband, because this would be a case of, if she were to go back, this is a case of machzor grushoso mishanises. We continue at the top of Omid Beis. Zeh haklal. Following is the rule. Get achar miun, when in the order of events a get follows the miun. Asura lachzor lo. If she had married someone in the interim, meaning after she had been divorced, the woman cannot go back to her first husband. Miun achar get. If the woman had been divorced, taken back, and then walked away from the first husband through miun, and then married someone else, muteres lachzor lo. She can go back to the first husband, even if she had entered nisuin with the second man. Hamima'enes beish v'nises li'acher v'girsha. A woman who had left her first husband through miun, married a second man, and he divorced her. Li'acher married a third man, umiano bo, and she walked away from him through miun. Li'acher v'girsha zeh haklal. The following is the rule. Kol sheyoitza himenu beget. Any man from whom she departed with a divorce document, asur lachzor lo. She, in the event that she marries a subsequent man, she cannot go back to that fellow. Miun, however, a man that she left through miun, muteres lachzor lo. She can go back to that man. There is a Rashi on the fourth line from the top. Kol sheyotze menu beget asur lachzor lo. Any man that she left through being divorced, she cannot go back to him. Afalpi sheyotzesa Michel acharov b'miun, even though she had left the subsequent husband through miun, the fact that she left the subsequent husband through miun, lo batle legito didei, that doesn't undo the get of the previous husband, so she cannot go back to him. We turn back to the Gemara. The topic heading on the side is Ha'im Amrinon Demiun Mevatel Get. Do we say that? Is that really so? That miun undoes a divorce? Well, from our Mishnah, we get the following impression. Alma, that which our Mishnah taught, that miun that follows a get, that when you had a man divorced his wife, he took her back, and then she did miun and left him through miun, she can go back to him. What do we see from that? Alma osi miun umevatel get. So you see from that when miun followed the get, she can go back to the husband, that the miun neutralizes, it dissolves, it voids the get, meaning that it's as if the get is not there has never been done, so that if in the interim, if or afterwards she married someone else, she can go back to the first husband. And now we raise a challenge to that idea that miun is mevatel get. And notice this is a quote from just above. Use the arrow to align this with the source in our Mishnah. It said in the Mishnah, Hamamenes beish v'niseis li'acher v'girsha. She left husband 1, married Mr. 2, and he divorced her. Li'acher umianabo. She married Mr. 3, and she walked away from him through miun. Li'achir v'gir, she married another man and he divorced her. Zeha klal, kol shiyotza himenu beget, anyone from whom she left through a get, asur lachzor, she cannot go back to him. B'miyun muteres lachzor lo. If she left him through miyun, she can go back to him. Alma, what we see from here is lo osi miyun dechavrei ubotil gito didei. The miyun that she did with the subsequent man does not undo the get done with that she received from the previous man. So, if that be the case, so then miyun does not neutralize a divorce. Okay, that's the question. Omar Rav Yehuda, Omar Shmuel, Tavra. Tavra means, is from the word shavar, and the taf and the shin interchange, means break the Mishnah apart. Mish shanazu lo shanazu. He who taught the first part of the Mishnah, which suggested that miyun does dissolve the get, did not teach this subsequent part of the Mishnah, which suggested to the contrary. Omar Rava has a different take on this than Shmuel. Umay kushu, what's the question to begin with? Dilma miyun didei mevatel get didei. When you're dealing with the same individual concerning whom there was both miyun and a get, the miyun that she does to her husband that had previously divorced her, so that miyun undoes that get. And if she marries some other man and the second man divorces her, she can go back to the first husband. She's not considered under the isser of machzir grushosa mishenises. However, miyun dechavrei lo mevatel gita didei. Miyun that she does with a subsequent husband does not undo the get that a previous husband had given to her, and therefore she cannot go back to that man. Umay shno. What is the difference? My shno miyun dechavrei delo mevatel gita didei. Why is it that the miyun that she does with a subsequent man does not undo the get that the previous husband had given her? We explain. How do we explain that? The ID de makeres. Makeres means she recognizes. The ID de makeres b'merizosav ukrizosav. A husband and wife develop during their tenure together. They develop a form of, we'll say, communication, winks and hints and different hints and winks that can communicate a certain level of affinity and love and adoration from one to the other. So she, the girl who had been with this man, when she sees him, let's say, winking at her, that indicates to her that he is fond of her and wants to be with her. So since a woman recognizes her previous husband's hinting, and she goes and she was divorced by that man, and she went ahead and married a second man, we're afraid Ozal, the Megarish, the first husband who had divorced her, he might go Mishabesh Umaisila. He'll go and visit her when she's married the second husband, start his winking and what have you, and that'll arouse some kind of affinity in her heart, and she'll then want to leave the second husband, and it'll cause her to be miminus. It'll like ruin that new marriage, and she'll walk out from the second husband through miyun. And therefore we say that a man who divorced a woman, who then went and married a second husband, we're talking of course the minor type rabbinic marriage, we do not let her go back to the first man. That will deter him then from trying to mess up the marriage with the second her second marriage. Well, we're going to raise a question then. Miyun didei nami lo livtil gita didei. The miyun that takes place with the same man who had previously divorced her, we should say that the miyun does not undo the get, and we should consider her still a divorcee, and therefore if she were to marry someone else, she should be usher to go back to him. The ID de makeres beremizaisov ukrisaisov, since she recognizes her first husband's hintings, ozil mishabish umaisi law. This will then again cause him, the first husband, to, when she does marry a second man, to go and mess up her second marriage. So why is it then that with regard to Mr. 1 divorcing her, and then Mr. 2 experiencing her miyun, we say she can go back to Mr. 1. We say she cannot go back to Mr. 1, whereas in the case of Mr. 1 having divorced her, and then subsequently a miyun taking place, after marrying Mr. 2, she's allowed to go back to Mr. 1. Isn't there this same problem that when she's with Mr. 2, she'll recognize the first husband's hintings? The Gemara says no. In that case, where the husband 1 had divorced her, taken her back, and subsequently she walked out on him, that shows us that she doesn't tolerate him whatsoever. Hokvar shibsha v'lo ish bisha v'lo ishtabsha. Just to go over this last point again, in a case where the Mr. 1 divorced her and she went to Mr. 2, one has to realize that the divorce is something that Mr. 1 initiated. As far as we're concerned, she might very well have liked him. He threw her out. She went to someone else. The Mr. 1 might have regrets and try to mess up her marriage to Mr. 2. So we say in such a case she cannot go back to Mr. 1 so as to deter him from trying to do those kind of hinting to get her back. However, in the case where a man had divorced her, taken her back, and then she walked out, so it shows us that all the hintings and expressions of fondness that he may have shown to her didn't work. So once we know it doesn't work, we're not afraid that if she marries Mr. 2, the first husband, is going to try to wink to her and try to get her back. We know that all that stuff is ineffective. So therefore, he isn't motivated to go to try to wink and take her back. So if in the event she wants to go back to him, that's her decision, that's on her own volition, and therefore we can allow her to go back to him without the fear of the first husband trying to mess up her marriage. So as far as a distinction between the miyun done to the same man that had given her a get versus the case of the miyun done with a second man after she had been divorced by a first man, that distinction we can see. However, the Gemara says, Elo I kashya, if there is anything to ask about, dechavrei adechavrei kashya. With regard to a second man, within those topics of a second man, we will raise a seeming contradiction. Now, this is a long question, and on the side under the Mivneh heading, you see that the word alma will be highlighted with a double underline. Stiro bein shnei mikoros imiyun dechavrei mevatel gito didei. Does the miyun done with a second man have the power of undoing the fact that she was divorced by a previous man? So now let's continue with the Gemara and see what appears to be a contradiction. Maybe we'll spoil the suspense, but if you notice the Gemara after the long question, you see two answers. The first is given by Reb Elazar, and this matches the answer that was given before by Shmuel when we raised the first question. So you'll see a similar type answer. However, Ula will be a new kind of response when dealing with this particular new contradiction. So now the Gemara. On the one hand, the Reisha of our Mishnah says, Mi'ana boi v'hichzira. Nosan lo get v'nises lacher. A man had been with a Tana, minor girl, and she walked out, and then he took her back. And then the first husband divorced her, and then she went and married someone else. V'nises lacher, she married a second husband, Nisamlos Garsha, and then became a widow from the second man, or he divorced her. Asura lachzor lo. She cannot go back to the first husband. Now we want to infer here. Taima dinis armala oy nisgarsha. You know why she can't go back to the first husband? Because her departure from the second husband was either through his death or his divorcing her. Ha miana. However, had she initiated the departure through miun, muteres lachzor lo. That would be the inference. She would be allowed to go back. So that what do we see from this? Who is she going back to? She's going back to the first husband who had divorced her. We see from here that the miyun done with the second husband, in effect, voids or dissolves, cancels the divorce that had taken place with the first husband. If that had not been the case, if we wouldn't say that, so she would be also to go back to the first husband. Vera minhi. Now we raise the obvious contradiction. She left one through Miyun, married two, and he divorced her. Le'acher, umina, married Mr. 3. She walked out on him through Miyun. Umina bo. Zeh haklal. The following is the rule. Kol shiyosa menu beget. Asur lachso. Any man that she left through his divorcing her, she cannot go back to him when she after a subsequent marriage to someone else. But miyun, any man she had left through miyun, muteres lachso, she can go back to that man. Alma, we see from this, and here just focus on the dashed underlining that we saw 2 lines above. What do we see here? Lo osi miyun de chavrei. The miyun done with a subsequent man does not come umevatel gito didei and void the get, cancel the fact that she was divorced from the previous man. So if you focus, again by way of markings, just look at where we double underline the alma, and that which follows. The first point, which was inferred from the Reisha, was that osi miyun de chavrei umevatel gito didei. The explicit statement in the Seifa said, Lo asi miyun de chavrei umevato gito didei. That seems to be quite contradictory. Amar Rav Ozer, Tavra. So Rav Ozer says, split the Mishnah apart. Misha shanazu, lo shanazu. He who taught the Reisha is not the same author as he who taught the Seifa. So it's not a function of a contradiction, but rather 2 different opinions. 2 different opinions regarding the power of miyun to a subsequent husband on the get done by a previous husband. Ula Omar. Ula says, as I say, he has a different approach. Kagon de sheshilsha begitin. When we say that she cannot go back to the man who had divorced her, we're talking about a woman who had been divorced 3 times. De merci kegdola. She appears like an adult. The Rashi, we'll look at Rashi together. You'll find him a little less than halfway down. Sheshil shabegitin, sheotzia shalosh pe'amim beget. She had been divorced in the course of her marital history. She'd been divorced 3 times. Demersik gdola. She appears as an adult. Su lo hadra lachad minayu. At that point, she can't go back to them. The lo osi miyun, the acher livtuli. The miyun done by another man cannot undo 3 divorces, 3 gittin. Avokodem shetishalesh, before reaching the number 3, osi miyun de chavrei umevatel gita. The miyun done with a subsequent husband will in fact void the miyun, the get done by the previous husband. And if he wants to take her back, he can do so, and it wouldn't be a problem of machzir grushaso mishani says. We continue in the Gemara. Man Tana, who is the author. Remember, we said before, under Rebbe Ozer's name, that there are two authors in the Mishnah. One holding that Miyun de Chavrei is Mevatel Gita Didei, and the other one holding not so. That's the question. Who is the author? Omar Rav Yehuda Omar Rav. And before we go on, we want to take note of the markings. So you see under the Mivneh heading, a diamond is featured. These are Shnei Deos, two opinions, al Eza Halocha Be'inyan Miyun Bikshu Ladas B'Shas HaSakona. There was a time of danger where the Goyim had ruled against Torah learning. And that's called Shas HaSakona. And there's a question concerning Miyun that the rabbis wanted to know, what is the explanation, what's the answer regarding some Miyun-related question at the time of Sakona. So what the question was, we see Rav Yehuda Amar Rav presenting his version of the question, and later Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi presenting his version of what the question was. In both cases, you'll see a bow tie shape. V'sochru anoshim kedei limtzo lahem es hatshuva. In both cases, they hired people to seek out the answer. Once again, we're dealing with dangerous times, so they had to hire people to find out the answer. The Gemara. We asked a question. Man Tana, who is the author? Omar of Yehuda Amar Shmuel. My dichtiv meimenu bekesef shosinu aritzenu b'mechir yavohu. Through hiring, through paying money, so shosinu, we were able to drink. In other words, through paying money, we were able to find, to learn, to find the answer. B'shas hasakona nisbaksha halacha zu. It was at a time of danger that the following issue came up. Harei sheyotza mirishon beget umisheni b'miyun. She was divorced by Mr. 1, married Mr. 2, and left him through miyun. Ma'u shetach solution. Can she go back to the first husband? Basically, our topic of miyun de chavrei mevatel gito didei. Sachru adam echad be'arba mea zuz. They hired a man, paying him a lot of money, 400 zuz. Zuz is a type of coin. V'shalu es Rabbi Akiva bebeis asurin. They asked Rabbi Akiva while he was incarcerated, and he ruled that she cannot go back to the first man. As Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira ben Netzivan ve'osaran, they sought the answer from Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, who lived in Netzivan, a name of a place, and he said, she, likewise, like Rabbi Akiva, that she cannot go back to the first husband. So this would reflect the opinion that, in other words, we were asking who is the author of that idea that lo osi miyun de chavrei mevatel gito didei. The author of that would be Rabbi Akiva or Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Omar Rabbi Shmuel b'Rabbi Yossi lezu lo hutz rachnu. This is not a question. They didn't need to ask about a question like that. La'isur kores hitarta, la'isur lav lo kol shekain. This is very vague, but Rashi will hopefully make things very clear. La'isur kores, Rashi says, isur eishes ish. Kores is a very severe penalty, when it's a punishment that we don't often translate through when we learn the Shas. We simply refer to as kores. It's a function of dying young or having one's children die in his lifetime. That's kores, and something that's punishable by kores is reflective of its being a very serious type of matter. So an Isur kores, Isur eishes ish, a married woman, a woman's married to a man. For her to be with other men would be an Isur kores. So Isur eishes ish hifkata mimeno below get. Almo ein ma'asa shelo klum. In the case of a Tana who's married to a man, we allow her to walk away and then marry someone else. We see that we see from this that the Maisik Tana, the marriage that the Tana had initiated, is of no real weight, has no real value or weight to it. So we see that when you're dealing with minors, we void that which would have otherwise been an Isur Kores. Now the Isur Lav is a negative command that's not punishable by Kores. The negative command dealt with here is the issue of Machzir Gushaso, the taking back of a woman that a man divorced after she had married someone else subsequently. So that an Isur Lav of Machzir Gushaso, Rashi says, Lo Kol Shekain, Degalia Milsa Diktana Hi, Lo Hava Gita Klum. The fact that she walked away, she was Mima'enes from a second husband, whereby we say that the marriage between husband and man, husband and woman is an Isur Kores, and that we allow to be undone. Certainly, we will not view with prohibition the Isur of her being taken back by the first husband. So, as far as Rabbi Shua Rabbi Yossi is concerned, that would not be an issue ever raised. Namely, that Miyun de Chavrei certainly is Mevatel Gita Didei, and she certainly can go back to the first husband, and there's no problem of Machzir Gushaso Mishenises. Bram Kach Shalu. However, if there was some type of question to be raised concerning Miyun, and they had to hire someone during this time of trouble, this was their question. Harei Shahoisa Eshes Achi Imoy Shishniolo Venises Ochiv Me'oviv Umes Mao Shitemain Hashta. Now, in order to appreciate this case, let's take advantage of the diagram that we've provided. You see in this diagram a fairly involved family relationship. There's a woman that has a son. You can see he's in a diamond. He has a brother. This Ben, the fellow that you see in the diamond, he was produced through a union between his mother and some man that we call Av. Now that man, that Av, you can see has a son that he had through another woman, and he's called Ben. So now the following takes place. There had been a marriage, a ketana marriage, a minor marriage between the brother of the mother that you see in the Ben has a mother. You see to the right of the aim an ach. So his mother's brother happened to be married to a woman, an isha, that's a ketana, a minor marriage, a rabbinic marriage. So you have the Ben seeing his uncle, in other words, his wife's brother, in a rabbinic marriage. Now, as far as the order of events, stage one, the fellow's uncle, the ach, dies. The isha ketana goes ahead, and in the second stage of events, she goes and marries the fellow in the diamond has a brother through a common father. The Isha Tana goes and marries that fellow, the diamond fellow's brother. And then that fellow dies, leaving no children. You have a yibum situation set up here. There's one problem, and that this girl was once the wife of the fellow's mother's brother. That relationship called the wife of mother's brother is ordinarily a prohibited, one's uncle's wife when it's a mother's brother. Very specifically, the word uncle is a little broad, a little too expansive. So we have to focus here on mother's brother's wife. That's called an erva, a shnia. A shnia meaning an isur d'Rabbanan. Don't confuse this, by the way, with a father's brother's wife, which the Torah calls dodoso. But I hope we're not getting too complicated, so put that off on the side. In the meantime, you have a girl that, as far as her marrying the fellow in the diamond, would be an isur d'Rabbanan. However, upon the death of what we see there on our chart, the diamond's brother, can she do mi'un regarding her original marriage? And if she does mi'un regarding the original marriage to the fellow's mother's brother, if she does mi'un, so then we would say she was never really married to him, and then because the fellow's brother died, she could then do yibum. So that is the case we read. But let's read the words again in the Gemara. Rabbi Yossi said that the original matter was not part of the discussion, the issue of miyun dechavrei being mevatel gito didei. However, this is a question. So we're reading the Gemara from the last narrow line. Harei shahoisa eshes achi imo. There was a woman, again a tana, that was married to one's mother's brother. She's shniolo. Shnia is a prohibited relative or relationship on a rabbinic level. V'nosa achiv mi aviv, and the fellow's brother from a common father married her. Of course, it's obvious from the chart that the fellow's brother from the common father has no connection to that girl, and he married her. Mahu shetemayin hashta, can this girl express miyun regarding her original marriage, which would make her then a non-shnia, v'takrinu l'nisun kamoy, and thereby retroactively uproot the original marriage to the fellow's mother's brother, v'tisyabem, and then do miyun, and then do yibum, that is. Yesh miyun li'achar misa, b'mokli mitzvah lo, and this is the question, can miyun be done after death when there's an issue of a mitzvah at stake, the mitzvah of yibum? Sachru shnei b'nei Adam b'arba mea zuz, 2 men were hired at the cost of 400 zuz. Ubo v'shvalu es Rabbi Kiva beis asurim v'osar. Rabbi Kiva was asked while he was incarcerated, and he said it's osir. As Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira ben Nitzivin v'osar, and likewise Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira took the restrictive approach that she cannot do that. Omar Rav Yitzchak bar Ashianu Moide Rav Shemuteres Le'ochiv Shel Zeh Shenesra Olav. Rav will concede that she is muteres to the brother of the one unto whom she had been forbidden. We had said before that lo osi miyun dechavreu mevatel gito didei, that her leaving a second husband through miyun does not undo the fact that she was divorced by the first husband, and that first husband who had divorced her cannot take her back. And we explained why is it that he cannot take her back, because if he were able to take her back, that would motivate him to meet up with her while she's married to the second fellow and wink at her and try to express his affinity toward her and butter her up in order to want to leave the second husband. And we don't want people being motivated to mess up others' marriages. So we tell the fellow, look, you divorced her. That's it. You cannot take her back once she marries someone else, even if she leaves the second fellow through miyun. So he knows that it won't help even if he shows up and tries to wink at her. He is not allowed to take her back. What our Gemara here is telling us, true, he is not allowed to take her back, but his brother is allowed to take her back. And the point, halachically speaking, is we are not going to consider her what's known as grushas ochiv. In general, when you're dealing with regular adult marriages, when a man divorces a woman, she is also not only to she is not allowed to be married by the fellow's brother, assuming that we're not dealing with any yibum stories. Obviously, if you're dealing with the divorce, there's no yibum. That's called an isur of grushas achiv. Just like a woman that's married to one's brother is forbidden as eishes achiv, when the brother divorces her, she's still usher to the brother, known as grushas achiv. In our case, that Rav Yitzchok bar Ashin is describing, we have a man that had divorced his wife. She went ahead and did miyun, married a second man and did miyun with him. That woman, this ketana, can marry the brother of the one that originally divorced her. If that sounds a little complicated, we have a chart, and sometimes charts even complicate matters more. But if you look at the chart that we've provided in our Gemara, we have a man. We call him Roman numeral number 1. He was married to a ketana. And as far as the order of events are concerned, this man who happens to have a brother, you can see, is called Ach. The man, Roman numeral number 1, he divorces his wife. That's stage 1. He divorces her. She goes ahead and marries a man we call Roman numeral number 2. That's the second stage. She marries someone else. And then, stage 3, she does miyun with that man. So our halacha had said that we learned earlier, that woman, the isha ketana there, cannot go back to marry Roman numeral number 1. However, what Rav Yitzchok is telling us, she can go and marry, we have this as stage 4, she can go and marry the brother of number 1, even though she's usher to Mr. 1 himself. So now we'll read that again in the words of the Gemara. Amar Rav Yitzchok bar Ashian u'moide Rav. Rav will concede, shemuteres la'ochiv shel zeh shenes rolov. She is mutter to the brother of the one that she had become usher to. The Gemara asks, Pshita, oh, that's obvious that she's mutter to him. Who nihu demakeres b'rimizosav b'kusosav aval ochiv lo? We said before, and I know we're repeating this maybe for the 3rd or 4th time, that she cannot go back to Mr. 1, the one who had divorced her, because that's our preempting his winking at her and making all kinds of hints and motions. Well, we don't want him messing up her marriage to Mr. 2. So the only one to really worry about, to prohibit, is that guy who's hinting she recognizes. She knows how her previous husband tried to attract her. She doesn't know how her previous husband's brother behaves. The previous husband's brother doesn't represent a threat to going and messing up her marriage to Mr. 2. So there's no reason to prevent her, to answer her from going to marry the brother of Mr. 2. And in that case, we would say that the miyun that she does with Mr. 2 does dissolve the get that Mr. 1 gave with respect to Mr. 1's brother. And we don't call her grushas achiv. So this statement of Yitzchok bar Ashian seems to be the statement of the obvious. The Gemara says, no, it's not so obvious. Mahu detema. Without this, I might have thought ligzor high or too high. We should prevent her marrying the brother of Mr. 1, because if we allow her marrying the brother of Mr. 1 on the grounds that she's not called grushas achiv, or too high, she's not considered a grush at all, because of the miyun that was done. The miyun that was done totally avoids the get, and she's not called machsi grushaso mishimises altogether. Komash malon. That's what I need Rabbi Yitzchok bar Ashian to tell us, that we don't make such a gzera, and the distinction will remain clear, that she can marry the brother of Mr. 1 and not go back to Mr. 1 himself. The Ika the Amri Amar Yitzchok bar Ashian Amarav Kishem shasura lo, kach asur li achin. Just like she cannot, the woman who had been divorced by one and married Mr. 2 and did miyun with Mr. 2, we say she cannot go back to Mr. 1 himself, so too she cannot go and marry the brothers of Mr. 1. The Gemara asks, why should she not be allowed to marry the brothers of Mr. 1? Was that brother going to threaten her marriage to Mr. 2 at any point? She doesn't recognize the winking and hinting of her first husband's brothers. So the Gemara says that may be true, but gezerah achiv atuhu, we make a gezerah, prohibit her marrying any one of his brothers in anticipation of, if we were to allow that, she would then think it's mutter for her to marry the man himself that had divorced her, and that we already said was totally Ozer.